the Sopwith F.1 Camel. 6 months were to elapse after the appearance of the first Sopwith triplane until the next single-seat fighter emerged from the experimental shop of the Canberry Park Road Works. Doubtless because it had been found that, great though the advantages of the triplane configuration could be, it imposed limits on the speed that could be attained. Designated Sopwith F1, the new fighter was powered by the 110-horsepower Clerget 9Z rotary engine, and was armed with 2 Vickers machine guns firing through the disc swept by the air screw. It was in its armament that the F1 represented the greatest advance upon its predecessors, and offered British fighter pilots the means of meeting the new Albatross single-seaters on equal terms. The guns were partially enclosed in a humped fairing that quickly earned the aircraft the nickname Camel. This name was immediately popular and eventually had to be recognized officially. The Camel bore a general family resemblance to the Pup, but had a deeper fuselage in which the pilot sat well forward. The main masses of engine, fuel, armament, and pilot were thus kept close together, an arrangement that enhanced maneuverability but placed the cockpit between the rear center section struts, from which the position of the pilot's view was somewhat restricted. As originally conceived, the F1 was to have equal dihedral on upper and lower wings, but it was thought that production would be facilitated if the top wing were made in one piece. The design was therefore revised. The top wing was made straight, and the dihedral angle of the lower wings doubled in rough compensation. With a one-piece wing, the F1 prototype was passed by the Sopwith Experimental Department on 22 December 1916. This was the first of several prototypes, some of which were built as private ventures. 2 F1s numbered N517 and N518 were ordered by the Admiralty. The first of these was tested at Brooklands on the 26th of February 1917. By May of 1917, N518 was at Martlesham Heath, fitted with the first 150-horsepower AR-1 engine. The aircraft that was apparently regarded by the Sopwith Company as the second prototype was designated F1/1 and differed from the F1 in having tapered wings with single broad-chord interplane struts. Powered by a 130-horsepower Clerget 9B engine, the F1/1 did not undergo its official tests until May 1917. Its performance showed no improvement over that of the constant-chord F1 and was not developed. The F1/1 had been preceded at Martlesham in March of 1917 by the F1/3, which was then powered by a 130-horsepower Clerget 9B. This aircraft still had the one-piece upper wing and short ailerons, but as on another prototype, which may have been the F1/2, a cutout was provided in the center section in order to improve the pilot's upward view. The F1/3 was regarded as the production-type prototype. It was tested with alternative engines. The 110-horsepower Larone 9J in May of 1917, the 140-horsepower Clerget 9BF in the following July. The production Camel differed from the F1/3 in having its upper wing made in 3 parts. Longer ailerons were also fitted. First deliveries were of Camels for the Royal Naval Air Service from the Sopwith-built batch N6330 to N6379, beginning on May 7, 1917. The Royal Naval Air Service Camels had either the 150-horsepower BR-1 or the 130-horsepower Clerget. Throughout the summer of 1917, the re-equipment of Royal Naval Air Service squadrons numbers 3, 4, 6, 9, and 10 proceeded. The first War Office contract for Camels was given on the 22nd of May 1917 and was initially for 250 aircraft, B-2301 to B-2350, to be built by Ruston Proctor and Company. The 100-horsepower Clerget was specified. Further orders were placed in June 1917 with the Port Holm Aerodrome for B-4601 to B-4650, and the Sopwith Company, B-3751 to B-3950. In the latter case, the 110-horsepower Larone and 130-horsepower Clerget were specified engines, but many of the Sopwith-built aircraft went to the Royal Naval Air Service and were fitted with 150-horsepower BR-1s. No. 70 Squadron was the first Royal Flying Corps unit to have the Camel. Its re-equipment was complete by the end of 1917. From then until the end of the war, the Camel was used on almost every front by many units of the Royal Flying Corps, Royal Naval Air Service, Australian Flying Corps, l'Aviation Militaire Belge, the Royal Hellenic Naval Air Service, and the United States Air Service. Well over 5,000 F-1 Camels were built by 9 contractors, and the type was still in production by the time of the armistice. Until the end, the Larone, Clerget 9B and 9BF, and the BR-1 remained the standard power units, but other engines were fitted. Some Camels had the 100-horsepower Gnome monosoupape. This combination was tested at Martlesham Heath in August 1917. The recorded performance was comparable with that of the 130-horsepower Clerget Camel, but little seems to have been made of the monosoupape version. A later type of monosoupape engine was rated at 150 horsepower and was controlled in an unusual manner by a multi-position ignition switch that provided a throttling effect by progressively cutting out pairs of cylinders. At the minimum power setting, only one cylinder fired. An engine of this type was first tested in a Camel in December 1917, and at least 2 British Camels were fitted with it. Performance was good, but the engine was not adopted for British use. The Camel installation of the 150-horsepower monosoupape was revived in 1918 when the U.S. Air Service bought a number of the engines and wanted to put them in Camels. The conversion was undertaken by Bolton & Paul Limited, and an American monosoupape Camel was tested in October 1918. The armistice stopped further development. At a late stage, a trial installation of a 170-horsepower Larone 9R was made in F-6394, which was tested at Martlesham Heath in February 1919. An earlier installation of this power unit had been made in France in B-3891, a Camel that had been transferred to the French government. In its flying qualities, the Camel was devastatingly different from its docile and tractable predecessors. In the right hands it was astonishingly maneuverable, but it was remorseless and savagely unforgiving of the kind of mistakes that were made by too many of the ill-trained young men who were required to fly it after pitifully few hours of flying instruction. Nevertheless, it became one of the supreme dogfighting aircraft in the aerial armory of the Allies. Because it was so sensitive, the Camel was the cause of many accidents at training units. A 2-seat version was therefore evolved in 1918 for training purposes. In spite of its extreme sensitivity, the Camel was used as a night fighter in home defense squadrons. It was found that pilots were momentarily blinded by the flash of their guns, and the use of explosive and incendiary ammunition in synchronized guns was regarded as dangerous. For these reasons, a modified Camel was evolved. Its cockpit was moved aft, and the Vickers guns were replaced by twin Lewis guns on a double Foster mounting above the center section. Various arrangements of armament were fitted to individual aircraft. This night fighter version of the Camel was, like the similarly modified 1.5 Strutters, nicknamed the Sopwith Comic. The standard power unit of the Camel night fighter was the 110 horsepower Larone. The rearward position of the pilot dictated a revision of the fuel system, and a standard BE-2E tank was fitted in front of the cockpit. This version of the Camel was still in service when the war ended. F-1 Camels were used in experiments in flying fighter aircraft from lighters at sea, sharing the work of their near relation, the Sopwith F.1. In December 1918, the Isle of Grain had tested a Camel with an enlarged rudder of 6 square feet. The standard surface was 4.9 square feet. This aircraft later had a rudder of 6.4 square feet in area and an enlarged fin of 3.5 square feet. The standard was 3 square feet. Farnborough also fitted Camels with enlarged tail controls for spinning experiments. B-2312 and H-7363 were being tested with Imber self-sealing petrol tanks at Farnborough in February 1920. Some F-1 Camels were used by the U.S. Navy, and a few went to Canada after the war. In the Royal Air Force, the type was superseded by the Snipe, and all its associations are with wartime combat. But a few saw post-armistice fighting against the Bolsheviks in Russia and Poland until 1920. As you might imagine, there are far too many photos to go in this video, so there's not going to be enough room for my normal montage at the end. And the Sopwith Camel 2 F1 is the next video, so stay tuned. Here's some leftover photos. So artificial intelligence is imposing itself on my life. On the Home-Built Aircraft forum, I was accused of being an AI, which is something I'm probably going to have to deal with for a long old time. But I can understand the consternation, because I got this email recently, and this person, Naila Akram, is offering to edit my videos as long as I send her the script and narration, and we can split the 50 cents, I suppose. All right, Camel 2 F1 coming up next.